Hey guys, so I want to talk about the 20 things that are on the syllabus really quickly. And I'm going to go through these really quickly. I'm going to keep this video under 10 minutes. So I'm not going to go into tons of detail about this, but I want to touch on each one of those 20 to some degree, just a little bit. The one thing I want to say before I do, if you are answering one of those that doesn't have as much, you're not going to find a ton of research on it, that it's more opinion-based questions. Do make sure that you do find some research somewhere to support what you're saying. For like number 20, for example, do we have a soulmate? Obviously, there's a lot of opinion there. Find some research on compatibility that supports what you're saying. Just make sure that you're getting enough research in there as well. I would recommend to not only choose on this list of 20 things that you can't really find research. Mix and match it. Find something that is more opinion based and something that you can find some good research for as well. Alright, so going through this list, and I'm going to go through this list really quick. Number 1, what is love? The other video touches on that a little bit, how it might be a motivational drive as opposed to an emotion. If you want to believe it's an emotion, by all means, there's still articles that come out that look at it as a secondary emotion today, but that's the definition it fits as secondary emotion, so you can look at it like that. That's what Helen Fisher's article is all about. How does love relate to you and or society? Obviously, a lot of opinion that can go on to that. And also for those that have some more interest in looking at the sociological aspect of it, you can get into that a little bit there. Don't go overboard with it, but you can definitely look into society a lot more. What would happen if we did not love? Number 3. Not much, I guess, I have to add about that, and it goes into what we were talking about a little bit, what Helen Fisher's talking about. If it's a motivational drive, it's a need, it's not a want. So it would be pretty hard to think of love without a culture without love. There's basically none that exists, so you can go into some detail about that. Number 4, why is it so hard to be dumped, and why do we just love harder? I talked about that a little bit in the other video when I said you make a list of the things you feel when you first start falling for a person, and then another list of the things you would feel when you were dumped. They both are going to relate to dopamine, so that's going to be a big part of why it can be painful when we're dumped. Do we need consummate love to truly be in love? That goes into Robert Sternberg. Consummate love is going to be having passion, intimacy, and commitment, all 3 of those things. Do we have to have all of those things to truly be in love? Well, there's plenty of people who would classify themselves as being in love that would not have all 3 of those things. Are they still missing something in love? Is that a mistake that they classify themselves as being truly in love? And you can look at it, and you look into Robert Sternberg and the triangle of love into more detail about that. Number 7, why do we cheat, whether it's biologically or psychologically? I'm not going to add too much on this because there's plenty of avenues you can research on that. What I will say is that men and women, there's a big gender difference here. We do tend to cheat for different reasons. I'm sorry, I skipped over number 6. It's number 7. I'll come right back to number 6. We do tend to cheat for different reasons. Men tend to cheat more for the physicality of it and what would relate to the sex drive and to vasopressin. Women tend to cheat more for the emotion of it, what would relate to dopamine or oxytocin. What does it mean? It means that potentially men might be more likely to cheat than women in general. Women might be more likely to have a full-blown affair than men in general. There's more research needed on that as well, but there's a lot to why we cheat. Obviously, we know both genders can cheat. Skipped over number 6, so let me go back to it. Why do men and women look for different things in a relationship and a mating partner? Big time goes into the gender differences. A good person to research would be Dion, D-I-O-N. Both men and women tend to, in a long-term relationship, we always are hesitant to use the term marriage, not everyone believes in it, but in a long-term relationship, we both tend to value personality. We simplify that usually to warmth and trustworthiness because people want different things, personality. But beyond that, it's very different. Men tend to look more for physical attractiveness, women more for power and status. Very different things. That goes into some evolutionary theory on why we do that. We might be equals right now, and there's a question about that even going one of the later numbers. I don't remember what one. We'll get to it. Is we are at a point where we're pretty close in gender equality, yet we still see some differences that shine about, and one of the other ones is going to be about why do men traditionally pay for the first date, and that's really the simplified why is that. When you start to look at some of these things, is that evolutionary theory, some of these things trickle down, some of these things still leak through. Women, at one point, men were the providers of the household. Men were the ones who did the providing, and women maintained and raised the household, raised the children, and things like that. So they might look for, and they still potentially today look for power and status. The job might be more important because they want someone that potentially can provide for them. Men would look for a more physical attractive mate because it was a sign of fertility. Now, as we've looked at that more and more, only really hip size has a sign of fertility as a strong, any kind of a significant correlation. There might be some fertility symptoms other than that with physical attraction, but certainly not significant ones that we would put any real note into. But that would be a potential reason that we would look for different things, is that we still might see those things trickle down and have these emotional leaks to that. Number 8, what neurotransmitters are responsible for what, and how do we personally feel each? I talked about those in the other video a little bit: oxytocin, vasopressin, dopamine. Number 9, what is the lust, attraction, attachment process, and how does it relate to you? Again, talked about that in the other video a little bit. It will also relate, 8 and 9 also relate to each other. Number 10, is there a such thing as love at first sight? Plenty that you could say about that. Potentially you might talk about, is it love at first sight or is it lust at first sight? But you can find some research to support that. So even though there's a lot of opinion there, make sure you look for a little bit of research. Number 11, can ex-lovers be friends after they break up? Again, a lot of opinion into that question, but it goes into, well, when we do break up, oxytocin doesn't usually go down to 0. So how does that work? And especially if you had a child with the person, oxytocin doesn't get all that low with the person just because you had a child with them. That could mean that you have some emotional investment with the person. So is it something that you can still be friends after you break up? Or would that always get you into trouble? Number 12, why do people re-enter relationships after they end, whether it's shortly after or years after? The shortly after goes into that same thing when you're dumped, in the dopamine aspect of it, that we can have that dopamine response. Years after can go into what I just mentioned with the oxytocin, that it doesn't go down to 0, so we might go back to the person, and there's more that you can add into that as well. 13, what are the merits of internet dating? Does it work compared to speed dating, etc.? I've done research on this. I love this subject. I've done some research on this. There's plenty of internet dating websites out there. Because they do work, there's definitely risks involved with that, especially with catfishing and for women with trust issues and things like that. But what are the merits of it? Where does it go? Where is it bad? And where does it work? Where does it not work? If you're interested in that more, you can always talk with me about it more. Like I said, I've done research. I have a lot of investment into that subject. Number 14, given that we are closer and closer to gender equality, why do men traditionally pay for the first date? That's what I had mentioned before. Number 15, why do we seek partners who are like our opposite sex parent, providing a heterosexual relationship? There's plenty that you can add to this. I will simplify this really quickly for you guys. If you find someone that's like your opposite sex parent, presumably they would raise your child like your opposite sex parent raised you. So then you would just have to be a little better than your same sex parent, and your child would be better off. That tends to be a theme that's consistent, is that parents want their child to be better off than they were. And that's a way to keep it within your own locus of control. Number 16, can a physical relationship exist without an emotional attachment, i.e. friends with benefits without feelings coming about? Plenty that you could say about that. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. Potentially, and certainly we can have casual sex and have that in the short term. Can it last in the long term? Well, that's for you guys to answer. And potentially what comes to mind for me, I think the name of the movie was Friends with Benefits with Justin Timberlake, where eventually they hit that wall basically, and then emotion it had to come about. That's the potential with that question. 17, are workplace romance is a good thing or a bad thing? I'm going to leave so much of that up to you guys, but what I will say about that is, this is another thing that I've done a lot of research on. What the research finds is there's definite advantages to discouraging it if you only plan on keeping your employees for a short period of time. Why? Think about a relationship that started for you. You're always thinking about the person. You're always on your mind. Presumably that's going to take time away from your productivity at work. But if you're going to keep employees for the long term, then potentially you might want to encourage them, because that has very big potential benefits in the long term. People are potentially willing to work for less money because they want to stay working with the person that they're in a relationship with. They also tend to be more productive because they can't imagine not working with that person. They don't want to get fired. And there's plenty more that you can add on to that. Again, if you have interest in that, you can always shoot me emails and we can talk more. When is it true that opposites attract? What are the limitations to it? Plenty that you can add on to that. that you can start adding there. Where are the times where opposites attract and where are the times where they don't? There's going to be certain times probably to both of those. You can talk about that as much as you want. Number 19, now that homosexual relationships are becoming more accepted and research is starting to examine them, how do these relationship dynamics change, if at all? Were they the same or different? What would you expect to see future research to find here? There is a lot of interesting things here. This is near and dear to my heart as well, because I have a close friend of mine who is a homosexual male who got into psychology to do research on this subject, and he wasn't able to do it until a little more than a year ago. Why did he get held up for so long? There wasn't funding for it, and we do need funding for it. So the sad thing is that the funding might have been a little slower than culture to catch up to this. Now, with that said, there's plenty that you can talk about. What's great about this subject is the research is really just starting to come out faster and faster and faster. You might find research I've never even read on this subject, and it's newer and fresher and very refreshing research. So there's plenty that you can go into there. Number 20, do we have a soulmate, whether it's one, whether it's multiple? You could talk about that. Again, like I said at the beginning, there's a lot of opinion in some of these questions, especially in that one. Make sure you get some kind of research to support it, even if you're just finding research with compatibility and things like that for a question like this. And balance it. Don't only choose ones that is all opinion. Balance it with some ones that you can get a little more research on. Alright, and like I said at the end of the last video, if you have questions, shoot me emails, message me on Skype, we can talk more about it. But definitely watch the video from Helen Fisher, read the article from Helen Fisher. You can look up Dion, D-I-O-N, like I said, might be a good name to look up. Arthur Aron could be a good name to look up. They've even talked about Arthur Aron and some of his work on the Big Bang Theory. There was an episode, I think it was this past season, where they talked about how if you answer 20, 40, whatever questions it was, and then look into each of the person's eyes for 5 minutes, you can fall in love with the person. That's based off of staring into the person's eyes increases oxytocin. Answering those questions, they're increasingly more revealing, so you potentially could have more of an investment. So there's some really interesting names, and there's plenty more that you can do research on your own to find that. So do some research, watch my other video, watch the other things I've posted about Helen Fisher, and do some research. And then if you still want to chat, I love this subject. Like I said, I've done so much research on this subject. It's basically my passion for my career. We can chat on Skype, by email, and chat a little bit more. Alright? Take care, guys.